Hi, and welcome to the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm Meredith Atwood, author of the book, The Year of No Nonsense. I'm a former attorney turned writer, speaker, and Ironman triathlete. Although right now, all I really like to do is lift weights. We all have the same 24 hours, but it's what we do in those hours that leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. It's my goal to crack the code on a life of less nonsense so we can all make the most of our 24 hours. So let's get started. Hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Same 24 Hours podcast. I am your ship captain, Meredith Atwood. It's great to have you listening, and for those on YouTube watching, very excited about our guest today. Arielle Estoria is here. Hello, friend.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to talk to you. I was telling Arielle offline that I found her sometime in May and started following her, and everything she posts, I just go, yes. And I move on. You know what I mean? It's just, I love when I have Instagram accounts. Not that it's like, oh, I want everyone to agree with me and I want to agree with everyone, but it just feels so good when there's people out in the world that are saying things that are really in your heart too. And so thank you for that.
Thank you.
I might bust into a poem, but I would not dare.
Yeah. I fully support it.
Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of poetry, so that is how you started poetry. Tell me a little bit about, the short story of who you are, how you came to be a poet, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in the Bay Area, and I'm the oldest of 5 kids. Grew up with a dad and mom who were both very involved in ministry. It wasn't until high school where I went to an arts high school, and I studied theater, and I studied my regular day-to-day high school things as well. But my days were from 8 to 4:30, and I really loved this art and academic space. And so I graduated in 2010. I went to Azusa Pacific University and studied psychology and theater because, again, I was practical and art. You can't have both. You can be both. And at first I went in thinking that I would do specifically art therapy for gifted children. So any child on the spectrum or anywhere between Asperger's and autism, because I just really, I had worked a lot with kids in that space, and I loved the conversations. I loved the moments of hearing them, say sounds or touch you or hold you, look you in the eyes. And so I wanted to introduce art in that space. And then the more I worked with college students, the more I fell in love with the college environment. So then I was maybe I won't work with kids, all the while still doing theater, still writing. So doing extracurricular things is what I call them while in college. I'm just these are just things you do in addition to the practical. And then I graduated in 2015, and nothing else really felt right except for pursuing creativity for the next year. And that is what I did. And so I've been full-time as a freelance everything for the past 5-6 years now. And a lot of that has involved poetry, but I've always written. I've always best saw the world and my own life and experiences and faith and everything in between through writing, through processing. I'm very much so a feeler of everything and all things. And so that was how I kind of grappled with myself at the end of the day. And then it became, I kind of say my journal pages, God kind of breathed on them and then gave them out to the world. Wow. And that's what I do now. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Oh my gosh. So I used to write poetry in high school. So and you're much younger than me, but the era of me was combat boots, dyed red hair, fake nose ring, goth, that was the origin of the coffee house. Right.
Yeah.
And so I have all these notebooks, and they showed up the other day, and my daughter was like, what is this? She's almost 12. I said, nothing. And she's like, what is it? And so she's looking, she goes, oh, this is really weird, Mom. She's like, what is this? And it's not just I just don't think kids these days get it. They don't get,
No.
back when
Well, I mean, they're in the world of TikTok and 15-second videos, and people who are famous because of TikTok and 15-second videos. And so it's craft is I would say a lot, not a lost cause with this generation, but it looks a lot different. You know, like I wouldn't consider an actor someone who just like makes sketches on a 15-second video, but that is what the culture is right now. So it's really interesting to kind of like be like, no, but what we did was art. You know, like what happened back then, that was like the good stuff. Like they're on a whole different wavelength. Yeah.
It's so bizarre. And I don't, you know, I'm 40. And so I keep thinking like, don't be an old fart. Like, don't be, you know, this isn't art. What is this these young people are doing? But I'm sitting here watching it and I'm like, what, this is not art. Get a notebook. And, you know, I'd rather you just sit in a coffee shop and smoke a cigarette if you were writing something. Like, pick up smoking and go write. Stop TikToking.
It's very different.
Right. But what do you feel in your heart when you're like, I am a poet, I'm a writer, I'm doing real art? How do you fit into this crazy? I mean, because you're doing amazing work and you're having, you're killing it, but it's such a different style than poetry. Like, how do these blend for you?
Yeah. Well, I think about that all the time, especially within the Instagram space. Like I'm a poet, but I'm also, you know, speaking to the body movement, you know, and also speaking to, you know, kind of being a model. And so it was Instagram really that was like, you're not just a poet, you know, it was Instagram really where I had to kind of expand. Because I didn't always love the videos that I was a part of, and so I wouldn't post those on my social media channel. So it took people a while for them to be like, you write? Like you're a poet? Like I thought you just modeled, you know, or I thought you were just, and so it's really interesting because I'm always like, who am I this week in this space, you know? And this week I think I'm very much so, I think I continuously have to come back to, I'm an artist, you know, like I love to speak, I love to keynote, I love to model and things like that. But like at the end of the day, I'm an artist. So I'm going to put out poems that I feel like are needing to speak to what's happening right now and what people need to hear and experience. I'm an artist, which means how I'm going to post is not just to bring things so that people purchase things, but feel and experience things. And so that's my thing, is what I continue to come back to. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I had a interview, and the way the woman posed it was like, I am, and then you insert your own phrase, even when, especially then. And at that point, it was like all my gigs were gone. I didn't know when I would be on stage again. And it was like, I am an artist, even when there's no stage to stand on, especially then. And even more so now in this social media space where it's very you're just swiping and clicking and swiping and clicking and double tapping. There's almost no room for artistry sometimes. Yes. And so for me, I think my goal is like, I want to slow the scroll a little bit, you know, like I want to create a pause.
You do that for me. I always pause.
Thank you. If that is my artistry, then I'll take it in this space, you know? And so I think that's what it is for me, is I continue to come back to, I'm an artist. So what does that mean in how I show up? What does that mean in how I present things? What does that mean in how I speak towards things? Because there's a different way that I think artists have the ability to do that, and coming to terms with that.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I feel this, and I don't know if you experience this. I've had a voice on social media for about 10 years. I blogged when, you know, before people really started blogging. I kind of hit it that way back when Facebook saw everyone's post, you know, back when there were no algorithms. And
once upon a time.
But there's a part of me that is so, and this is where I'm not a good business person, because I make my living coaching, really. So my relationships are one-on-one. Social media used to be the way, but I have this resistance where I'm like, I can't be bothered with this audience because it's too big and they want too much and I can't provide it, you know? And my Instagram is just this like conglomerate of whatever I feel like posting. I'm very bratty about it.
I love it. I think I'm starting to. So I really appreciate that, because otherwise you get stuck in, well, the algorithm. Well, I can't post until this time. Well, I post this because this is what gets traction. This is what gets like. And if that were the case, then I want to like have swimsuit and bra pictures on my Instagram because people just like to see your body, you know? So it's like, but I was like, I don't want to get trapped in just one conversation. So I kind of like your rebelliousness.
Yeah, I feel it. I feel it. And the bra and panty thing. So I'm training for a bodybuilding show. I've always been a big girl. I have all these beliefs around it. I don't care. I'm totally be the body you want to be, but I'm going through this thing like, can I morph my body? It's like an experiment. I do this all the time. The only posts that anyone cares about are me in my bathing suit. Like, has she done, and and like 1,000 and so that's like driving my hermitness even more, because I'm like, you don't get to see my progress. You don't get to see I ate peanut butter and ice cream and I'm not, you don't get to see it. You don't get to know me. And it's so stupid because I got my foot in the door by being known, by being a weird version of an artist, by being a writer, not a poet, not a good poet, writer. And so where do you keep, because you're so good at saying what you feel and connecting to your audience, but how do you keep something for yourself, and how do you always stay in touch with who you are and what you're feeling and resting and all of that, and also doing such a great job communicating like you do?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is just finding the permission to step back, finding the permission to not have to post, finding the permission to just kind of, I've been saying, protect my personhood. So days where I water my plants, I do my laundry, I don't do my makeup, I don't shower. I'm in, a sweater and some biker shorts, and I might pick up a book. I might go outside and read, just like little spaces where I'm like, I come from, a generation of women who don't know how to stop. I come from a generation of women who have been like diagnosed chronically burnt out. And I have always been very gentle with that awareness of where I come from and who I come from, and how to break that generational cycle, almost, if you will. And taking back and reclaiming this space to rest. Like I took a nap yesterday. That was partially because I started my period the next day. But it was also like I was tired, and I needed to sleep. And so I was in between shoots, and in between one, I took a nap for about 35 minutes, and then I got up and ate food, and then I continued on with the rest of my day. But I needed to sleep, otherwise I would have gotten to the end of my day and had nothing left, for anyone. And so really finding that permission and that grace to rest, and finding those days where you're like, the morning is slow, no one needs me, my emails do not need to be responded to right now, and finding those spaces and permissions to like I don't know where, I think Sunday is when I said it, protecting my personhood. And being married has helped a lot with that, because at the end of the day, like, I want to make sure I have time to be with my husband. I want to make sure like we have dinner. I want to make sure on the days that he's off, we kind of treat that like our weekends, because he works predominantly weekends. So our Thursday, Friday are like our Friday, or is like our Saturday and Sundays for us as a couple, so I might schedule some work later in the day on a Thursday. And so really finding those spaces and permission of like, the work can't exist without you first being well, and without you first being well, to spill from, and it has to be a full space in order to do that and to be that. And so that, and then also just like knowing there are some poems and some quotes that specifically go on Instagram, and then there's some that I keep for myself, or I'm in the process of writing a book, so there's a lot that I'll start writing for Instagram or for blogs or for whatever it may be. And then I'll be like, nope, I'm going to put this to the side, I'm going to save this for a later moment. And it's so sweet to be able to do that and to have that permission. But then sometimes I'll like take a word or two and I'll put it on Instagram, because I am kind of trying to gauge how people will respond to the book itself. And so I'll throw a little bit in there, but really knowing when to reserve space, time, healing for yourself is something I've been trying to really practice in this time. Yeah.
You are so wise. I wish I had found you, like, I don't know, 40 years ago when you weren't even born, because like so much of what you just said, you said, I felt that I needed a nap yesterday. Yesterday, I was looking at my bed and I was like, I need a nap. You cannot nap. do not lay down.
Right.
Like I have a friend I joke
Right.
with, he's always like, well, I'm going to go take a nap. I'm like, don't lay down. Cause like when he gets tired,
Because
he's
then
like,
you like, yeah, then you
oh,
stop and then it's like, I had a friend who like, we worked together and at that space and time in my life, I was very much so a perfectionist, but to the point where I stunted my ability to be uncomfortable or to mess up. And so he would tease me and almost make me like have to almost spill orange juice or little things like that at work. And I'm like, can you leave me alone? Like, you're gonna make me spill this. And he was like, okay, and so what if you do? And I'm like, then it spills, then I gotta clean it up, then I gotta make, and he's like, okay. And I was like, no, I don't like you, because then it's like, okay, and then you rest it. And then you get up and you do whatever it is you need to do that day, but like I think for a lot of it is like it can't. I'm very much so like, you got to keep going, like if I'm in the moment, I'm in the moment. And my husband's like, well, let's sit down for a second, like let's take a break. And I'm like, no, if I take a break, I may not get back up. And you're like,
may never
and if
get up
I
again.
don't, right. And if I don't, that's okay in this moment until you are able to get back up, especially now. I think there's so much grace needed within this space. Like both my husband and I had a breakdown yesterday because we do really well with like, okay, this is our new norm. This is where we're at right now. This is how life is. But then we both like, he works at a coffee shop and it's extremely depressing because no one sits in a coffee shop anymore. You can't. And for me, it's like I'm working from home. So I feel trapped all the time because I'm inside like a lot of other people. And so we both had a moment where we had to come to terms with our grief, of right now, of this space. And I think the last time we did that was around our wedding, and to acknowledge that we were excited to get married and to be married, but that it wasn't how either of us expected or dreamed or planned or wanted this year. And so we have these moments where we grieve separately. And then we have these moments where we need to grieve together because it's causing arguments or it's causing tension. And we're like, oh, we're both not okay. And so we had like a little tidbit and then we sat in the living room, like kind of like where we reversed it, because we had gone to bed. I'd gone to bed early and I was upset. And then he was upset. And then we just laid there upset. And then we ended up in the living room and it kind of reversed the whole evening. And we ended up sitting up and talking, for another hour of just like, work is sad, and I was like, I'm excited about the things I'm doing, but it's seeing mass, there's still so many things that are like, it still is weird, and so we both had to sit and grieve. And then we tried again and we went back to bed, and those moments are necessary. Grace, so much grace for yourself and for each other is necessary right now. So if that means you need to take a nap in the middle of the day and you may not get to the rest of your to-do list, I 100% recommend, because it will just be a stored up space for later, and you'll crash later. So crash now, heal now, process now, and allow yourself that space. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And you also mentioned, you watched your family, I guess, kind of rush around and, apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But for me, it's like, I never saw that and thought, oh, that's kind of crazy pants. Maybe I shouldn't do that. And instead I just like absorbed it. And I'm like, don't lay down, be a freak.
Absolutely. Oh. Yeah. And I did for a while, until my mom's, until her burnout got really bad. And she would warn me, like, you are a lot like me. And you have to be careful that I remember very distinctly, she said, you have to be careful that you don't get to this place. So I guess that gave me permission to rest, in ways that she couldn't, and really be about that generational breaking, if you will, of like, no, I want my daughter to work hard. I want our kids one day to work hard and to be their best, but I also want them to find the permission to rest if they need to, and not have to show up or not have to turn on, which is something I think I felt I had to do a lot as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned the word grace. What does grace mean to you in this particular climate? Politically and racially and all of it? Like what does the word grace mean to you? I know as a Black woman, this is not new to you, your experience and everything that's happened since, say, February. But for white people, white women, where a lot of us have been clueless and unsure, and now it's just a lot of lost, a lot of so the word grace is always one that gives me pause, because it's like, how much grace do I give myself, and how much grace do I give others? And it's just such a tough climate right now in this country and in the world, especially with the pandemic. I mean, unbelievable time.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few different definitions, for grace. And in a more spiritual space, it's, unmerited favor from God, from the divine, from however you clarify that. But I think where I've sat with it these days is the space. Like grace permits a space. Right now, in the conversations of cancel culture, there is no grace or space for people to really learn anything. There is no grace or space for people to actually grow. It's just this, you're done, it's over, like there's no room, there's no space for any change to actually happen. Same for us as people, like being intentional with where my husband is at work, and the fact that I may not have to deal with people all day, but he does, have to interact, and in ways that are sometimes uncomfortable and forced. So having this space and grace and empathy to understand him and to be aware of what he experiences all day, while also, being aware of what I experience all day. And so I think right now grace is a space, and in that space is what is needed here. Is it room to process? Is it room to grieve? Is it understanding? Is it empathy? And really sitting in those spaces of grace and of whatever needs to happen. But I think, especially within the racial pandemic, if you will, in this awakening that is happening for a lot of people, it's very disorienting. I kind of have adapted it with it. Everyone is waking up from a nap, and usually when that happens, it's like you're disoriented. What year is it? Is it the same day? Is it a different day? Like it's extremely like overwhelming. And so for someone who is like, oh, I've lived this, like I have a brother who is chocolate and tall, and a dad who is 6'4" and big, and has always like will walk by cars and I'll hear doors locked. Like it's very real things that I've never been able to sleep to. So this is not an awakening for me. This is a reminding, but it's still in that space. It is an awakening for a lot of other people, and allowing there to be space to like come to. Are you aware of where you're at? Are you aware of what's happening? Now giving space and grace in the room to act accordingly to the new information and to the new awakening that has been for a lot of people, and so I think a lot of it for me in this time is grace is a space, and in that space, where does growth happen? Where does understanding happen? Where does empathy happen? And filling it with those things. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Grace is a space. Yeah. The awakening, right? I mean, my good friend, one of my 5 Black friends, I'll go ahead and just say it. What she said, awakening, this has been our life, this has been our experience. And, grace in that term, like, and I'm not to put words in your mouth, but the amount of grace that, you probably give on a daily basis during this whole awakening, when you want to just give an eye roll and a face plant and be like, did you seriously say that? How have you not known? Of course you've known, and so I can't imagine the grace that you provide the space on a daily. So, but I appreciate all your posts and your work and the grace you post for everything. I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Tell us a little bit about your merch that you're launching, because my kids love that word. They're like, Ma, when can I get merch? And I'm like, what do you need merch for? Yes. I'm sorry, what is your business?
Yeah. Well, I've had like a few, usually I would bring them to shows and events and things like that. So prints and t-shirts and different things like that. And right now beforehand, they were through like all these different brands and small businesses who I loved working with, but there was no streamline to it. And I've been learning a lot within the pandemic of like, okay, we just need to bring everything here. Like as an artist, I'm like, boo, 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 just like things everywhere. And so I'm like, my left brain kicks in and my oldest child kicks in. And so I'm like, okay, organization, streamline, like, here we go. And so finding a streamlined space. So everything is through Shopify and then through a small drop ship boutique that I found that's women owned and I really love. And so there are prints, there are mugs, there are t-shirts, there are totes, there are baby onesies. And a lot of them say like, darling, you are magic. There's some quotes on there as well that you can download, or quotes that come as like physical like prints that I have as well that you can put up on your walls and things like that. Oh, nice. And yeah, they're just like fun. I think as an artist, I'm always thinking of like, okay, how can I have ways that connect people back to me, especially here virtually, and back to these words that I want them to literally or physically hold on to. And so you can find them on my website. We also have like hoodies, and then I'll like probably be like introducing little things as the holidays come of like candles and things like that you can gift people, because I know, the holidays are coming up and I think they'll look very different this year, just for a lot of different reasons. And so I know for me, I want to be really intentional about the gifts that I give and like why I'm giving them and what I'm hoping to convey in the giving. And so I hope that for some of you, it feels like that is a good thing to do. So
yes. So one more question. This podcast is called The Same 24 Hours, meaning that we all have the same 24 hours in our day. And it's what we do in this 24 hours, naps included, that leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. So I like to ask my guest, what is something that you do on a daily basis, like a consistent everyday that makes your 24 hours better because you do this practice or this habit?
Yeah. I tend to always wake up and do some type of movement. Whether that's like a dance class I saw on YouTube or a HIIT class I saw on YouTube, or just like I'm going to lay out my yoga mat and do some stretching and some flow and allow myself to breathe, and movement really helps. So either that's at the beginning of the day or a walk with my husband at the end of the day. I'm having some type of like reminder to come back into my physical body and kind of some gratitude for the way that it holds me for the day. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Arielle, thank you so much.
Thank you.